We think it's best if you go somewhere. Somewhere you can rest. Somewhere with professionals. That was my mother-in-law, Diane. She was standing in my living room. In the house, my grandmother left me. She held a brochure for a wellness facility. She held it the way someone holds a takeout menu. Casually. Like the decision had already been made. Like this was just the part where they told me. My husband Marcus was on the couch behind her. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the floor, at the spot where our daughter had spit up. It happened that morning. The stain was still there. I hadn't cleaned it yet. I'd been holding Rose for 3 hours straight. 3 hours trying to get her to stop crying. I hadn't slept in what felt like 11 days. The light in the room was gray and flat. The curtains were half drawn. I could smell old coffee from the kitchen. It's not permanent, Diane added. Just until you're feeling more like yourself. I was feeling exactly like myself. I was feeling like a woman 9 weeks postpartum. A woman whose baby wouldn't sleep. Whose husband went back to work after 4 days. Whose mother-in-law showed up every afternoon. Unannounced. Every single afternoon. She came to inspect the kitchen. She came to make observations. The baby seems fussy. Are you sure you're producing enough milk? She said these things like weather reports. Calm and factual and devastating. My name is Lily. I'm 30 years old. The house I was standing in belongs to me. My grandmother Rose built it with her husband. They built it in 1967. She left it to me when she died. She left it because I was the grandchild who came. Every Sunday I came. I brought her lavender shortbread. I sat on the porch while she told me stories. Stories about the azaleas. Stories about the neighborhood. Stories about a life built one brick at a time. I never once suggested she move. I never said the word manageable. I never tried to make her smaller. She left me that house with a handwritten note. The note said this. This is yours. Don't let anyone tell you it isn't. I should have framed that note immediately. Instead, I tucked it into her vanity drawer. I forgot about it. At the time, I didn't think anyone would try. I didn't think anyone would challenge it. I didn't think I'd need a note as a weapon. But my grandmother knew. She always knew. I met Marcus at a friend's wedding. I was 26. He was one of the groomsmen. Tall. Steady. The kind of man who refilled your water glass. He did it without being asked. He remembered the name of your dog. He had kind eyes and a firm handshake. He had quiet confidence. The sort that made you feel safe. Like everything would be fine. As long as he was nearby. The venue was a barn with string lights. The air smelled like hay and champagne. Music floated from speakers hung on posts. I noticed Marcus across the dance floor. He was laughing at something the best man said. His laugh was warm and unhurried. I liked him before he said a word. What I didn't notice was his mother. You never notice these things at weddings. But she appeared at his elbow constantly. Approximately every 11 minutes. She introduced herself before Marcus did. I'm Diane, she said. Marcus's mother. And you are? Lily, I said. Lily. That's a flower name. I've always preferred names with more substance. I thought she was joking. She was not joking. Diane never joked. Diane delivered opinions like weather forecasts. Factual. Inevitable. Not up for discussion. Her voice had a quality like polished stone. Smooth on the surface. Hard underneath. Marcus and I dated for 2 years. During that time, Diane called him every day. Not texted. Called. She had a landline. She used it like generals use field radios. For updates, status reports, strategic repositioning. She knew when Marcus had dinner with me. She knew when he stayed over. She once asked him at Sunday brunch. At her house. At her table. Whether I came from people with property? That is a sentence I didn't think people said. Not out loud. Not in the 21st century. Marcus laughed it off. That's just mom, he said. She's protective. Protective. That's a word people use. They use it when they don't want to say another. The other word is controlling. Protective sounds warmer. It has the same number of syllables. But the meaning is different. The way a fence is different from a cage. One keeps things out. The other keeps things in. The first time I had dinner at Diane's house, she served pot roast. The dining room smelled like rosemary and butter. The table was set with cloth napkins, crystal glasses. A centerpiece of white flowers. Everything was arranged with military precision. She asked me 14 questions in 40 minutes. She wanted to know where I went to college, what my mother did for work, whether my father was in the picture, what I planned to do about my career trajectory. I worked in nonprofit administration. I ran programs for a community arts organization. We served low-income families. I managed budgets and wrote grants. I supervised a team of 12 people. Diane referred to this as your volunteer work. She called it that for our entire relationship. Despite my salary, despite my retirement account, despite a budget larger than her renovation, her kitchen renovation. She brought it up at every dinner party. She described it like a military campaign. The countertops alone cost $14,000. She mentioned this twice per evening. It's nice that you have hobbies, she said once. I just told her about a grant we'd received. A significant grant. She said it the way you'd compliment a drawing, a child's drawing, with encouragement and zero expectation. Marcus's father had died when Marcus was 15. A heart attack at work. Sudden. No warning. One morning, he kissed his wife goodbye. By noon, he was gone. Diane raised Marcus alone from that point. She did it with a ferocity I initially admired. Eventually, I understood it differently. She wasn't just a mother. She was an architect. She had designed Marcus's entire life. His college, his career, his apartment, his social circle. She designed it the way you design a building. Load-bearing walls and no unnecessary windows. I was an unexpected door. Diane spent 2 years trying to seal me shut. I could feel her measuring me. Every dinner, every phone call, every carefully worded question. She was looking for the flaw that would undo me. She invited me to her book club once. It wasn't really a book club. It was 7 women. They'd known each other for 30 years. They drank wine. They made observations about their children, specifically about their children's partners. They did it with the precision of air traffic. The living room smelled like Chardonnay. The couches were cream-colored and stiff. Nobody sat back. Everyone perched. One of them was named Gail. She had silver earrings. She had the confident posture of certainty. The posture of someone who was never wrong. She looked at me over her wine glass. So you're the one Diane talks about. Good things, I hope, I said. Gail smiled. It was not a reassuring smile. It was the smile of someone holding a verdict. She says you're very spirited. Spirited. That's a word people use for horses. Horses they can't break. Daughters-in-law they can't control. I understood in that moment. Diane had already cast me in a role. I just hadn't read the script yet. I hadn't seen the stage directions. But I was already performing. We got married when I was 28. The wedding was at Diane's church. She'd been a member for 31 years. It would mean so much to her. Marcus said that. He said it like it was a small thing. It wasn't a small thing. It was the first concession of many. The flowers were white lilies. Not because of my name. Because Diane said they were appropriate. The only appropriate choice, she said. My mother had suggested peonies. Soft pink ones. The kind that smell like summer. Mom smiled and said nothing. That's what my mother does. She chooses her battles. My mother is a retired school counselor. She's from a small town. People there say what they mean, but only after thinking about it for a while. She has a talent for patience. It borders on geological. She once waited 3 years to tell me. 3 years to tell me she didn't like Marcus. When she finally said it, she was gentle. He's not unkind, she said. He's just not finished yet. She meant he hadn't become his own person. She was right. She's usually right. She just takes her time getting there. After the wedding, we moved into the house. My grandmother's house, a 3-bedroom Cape Cod on a 1/4 acre. It had a front porch with a wooden railing, a detached garage with a rusted latch, a backyard where Rose had planted azaleas. They bloomed every April. Pink and white, the color of something that refuses to quit. The house needed work. The kitchen was from 1983. The bathroom tiles were a shade of green, a shade that no longer exists in nature. But the house was mine. My name on the deed, my grandmother's curtains in the windows, my history in the walls. I could feel her in every room. In the creak of the 3rd stair, in the way the kitchen light flickered at dusk, in the smell of lavender that never quite left. Diane visited 3 times the first week. She brought casseroles and opinions. Both were unsolicited. She said the kitchen was dated. She said the neighborhood was transitional. She said the house was charming, in a grandmother sort of way. That's a compliment the way a backhand is. In tennis, technically valid, strategically hostile. Marcus didn't say anything. Marcus rarely spoke when Diane was in the room. He became a different person around his mother. Quieter, smeller, like a man standing in a building's shadow. A shadow he'd been living under his whole life. His shoulders dropped. His voice softened. He deferred to her on everything. Paint colors, dinner plans, the arrangement of furniture in our home. He became a boy again in her presence. And I became invisible. I noticed. I filed it away. I told myself it would get better. It did not get better. The first year of marriage was a negotiation. A negotiation I didn't know I was in. Diane had a key to our house. I didn't know this. Not until I came home from work one Tuesday. I found her reorganizing my kitchen cabinets. She had moved the plates to the left side. It makes more sense near the dishwasher. She had rearranged the pantry. She had relabeled the spice rack. Each label was printed in her handwriting. Neat, precise, possessive. She left a note on the refrigerator. Milk expiring. Check dates regularly. The kitchen smelled like lemon cleaner. Not my lemon cleaner. Hers. She had brought her own cleaning supplies. Into my house. While I was at work, the audacity wasn't loud. It was domestic. It wore an apron and carried a label maker. She's just being helpful, Marcus said. She relabeled my cumin. She likes things organized. She came into our house while we were at work. She reorganized our kitchen. Marcus looked at me. The way you look at someone making a valid point that requires a conversation. A conversation with his mother. A thing Marcus would rather walk on hot gravel than have that conversation. I changed the locks. Diane noticed within 48 hours. She tried her key on a Thursday afternoon. I was working from home. I heard the sound. The scraping sound of a key that doesn't fit. Metal against metal. The sound of access being denied. She rang the doorbell. I opened the door. My key doesn't seem to work, she said. Her voice was pleasant. The way a blade can be pleasant. We changed the locks, I said. For security? She looked at me. I would come to know that look well. Someone recalculating a route. After discovering a road closure. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. Then she smiled. Of course, dear. Very sensible. She called Marcus that evening. Marcus came home and asked me why I'd changed the locks without telling her. I said I wasn't aware. That home security required his mother's approval. He said I was being dramatic. I said I was being a homeowner. We didn't speak for 2 days after that. Not because of anger. Because of something quieter. The realization, we had different definitions of our house. Mine included 2 people. His included 3. That silence filled every room. It sat at the dinner table. It lay between us in bed. It was the shape of something I couldn't name yet. But it had weight. When I got pregnant, Diane's visits increased. From weekly to every other day, she brought vitamins I hadn't asked for. She emailed me articles about advanced maternal age. This was medically inaccurate. I was 29, but it was emotionally strategic. She started referring to the baby as our baby. That pronoun choice tells you everything. Everything about boundary awareness, or the absence of it. She asked about my family medical history. With the intensity of an insurance questionnaire, she wanted to know about my mother's side, my father's side. Whether anyone had episodes, I didn't know what she meant. She clarified. Emotional instability, depression, that sort of thing. She said it casually, like asking about the weather. But her eyes were taking notes. My grandmother planted azaleas for 40 years. Does that count? I said. She didn't laugh. She never laughed at my jokes. She cataloged them. The pregnancy was normal until it wasn't. At 34 weeks, I developed preeclampsia. My blood pressure spiked dangerously. The doctor's face changed when she read it. I was put on bed rest. Marcus was worried. Diane was something else. She was activated. There's no other word for it. She showed up with a binder. An actual binder, tabs, printed pages, high-risk pregnancies, neonatal care, and I noticed this later, postpartum psychiatric conditions. The section was highlighted, yellow highlighter, the color of preparation. She was not researching my health. She was building a case. I know that now. I didn't know it then. Then I was just tired. And the binder seemed like concern. My daughter was born at 37 weeks. Small but healthy. 5 pounds, 11 ounces. She had Marcus's nose. My mother's eyes. A cry that could strip paint off a wall. The delivery room was cold and bright. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. They placed her on my chest. She was warm and damp and screaming. And the screaming was the most beautiful sound. It meant she was here. It meant she was alive. It meant I was a mother. We named her Rose. After my grandmother, Diane suggested Diane as a middle name. We chose May instead. Diane's jaw did something tectonic. A slow, grinding shift beneath the surface. She smiled anyway, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. It never reached her eyes. The first 6 weeks were hard. Not unusual hard, normal hard. New mother hard. The kind of hard where you cry in the shower. Because the baby won't latch. Because your body doesn't feel like yours. Because you're so tired. So tired that you put the remote in the fridge. You don't find it for 2 days. Because your arms ache. Because your back aches. Because every sound feels amplified. The creak of the house. The hum of the refrigerator. The distant bark of a neighbor's dog. Everything registers as a potential threat. That's what exhaustion does to a new mother. It turns the world into something sharp. Marcus went back to work after 4 days. 4 days. He said his boss couldn't give him more time. I later found out he hadn't asked. He hadn't even asked. He'd chosen his comfort over mine. And I was too tired to fight about it. So I let it go. Like I let everything go those first weeks. Not because I didn't care. Because I was drowning. And arguing takes breath. My mother came for the first 2 weeks. She drove 4 hours. She arrived with a suitcase and a slow cooker. She cooked. She held Rose while I slept. She did laundry without being asked. She made coffee at 6 in the morning. She left it on the nightstand. With a note that said this, "You're doing great. Drink this." She didn't comment on the state of the house. She didn't inspect the nursery. She didn't bring a binder. She brought herself. Her steady, quiet, immovable self. The self that had raised me alone. The self that had never once wavered. When Mom left, Diane arrived. Not to help. To observe. She came every afternoon at 2. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock. I could set a clock by her arrival and dread by it. She held Rose for exactly 15 minutes, then handed her back. Then said things. She seems hungry. She doesn't seem settled. Have you tried that technique I sent you? She opened the refrigerator. She noted what was inside. She checked the laundry basket. She counted what was in it. She once picked up a onesie from the floor, held it at arm's length. Like a piece of evidence. Like Exhibit A. "Lily, this has been here since yesterday." "I know," I said. "It's been a rough day. Every day seems to be a rough day," she said. I wanted to say something sharp. Something that would make her stop. But I was too tired. And the baby was crying. And Marcus was at work. And the one thing I'd learned about Diane, in 3 years of marriage, is that arguing with her is like arguing weather. You can object, but the rain is going to fall anyway. You can hold up your hands, but the wind will still blow through you. Diane was a weather system. And I was standing outside without a coat. At 8 weeks postpartum, I had a bad night. Rose was up every 90 minutes. I hadn't eaten since noon the day before. My stomach was hollow and tight. My eyes burned from dryness. I was sitting on the nursery floor. It was 3 in the morning. The carpet was thin and rough beneath me. The nightlight cast a pale orange glow. I was crying, not because something was wrong, because I was exhausted and alone, because the floor felt safer than the chair. At least on the floor I couldn't drop the baby. At least on the floor there was nowhere to fall. Rose was asleep on my chest. Her breathing was steady and warm. She smelled like milk and baby lotion. The house was silent except for the furnace. A low, mechanical hum. The sound of a house breathing while you can't. Marcus found me there. He got up for water. He stood in the doorway of the nursery. He didn't sit down. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't kneel beside me. He didn't take the baby. He said this. Maybe mom's right. Maybe you need help. I need sleep, I said. I need you to take a night shift. I need your mother to stop judging me. She's not judging you. She's concerned. She counted the onesies on the floor, Marcus. She cares about our daughter. So do I. I'm the one on this floor at 3 a.m. Where have you been? He didn't answer. He went back to bed. I heard the bedroom door close. Softly. Like he was trying not to wake anyone. But I was already awake. I'd been awake for weeks. And in that moment, on that nursery floor, with my baby on my chest, and my husband walking away, I understood something. I was alone in this marriage. I had been alone for a while. I just hadn't had the energy to notice. 2 days later, Diane arrived with a brochure. The facility was called Greenfield. It had a website. Photos of women walking through gardens, sitting in rooms with neutral furniture, Beigesofas, soft lighting, vases of dried flowers on windowsills. It looked like a spa crossed with a hospital. That's exactly what it was. A place for people with insurance. A place families send you when they decide you need to be somewhere else. It's just a few weeks, Diane said. They specialize in postpartum adjustment. I don't need postpartum adjustment. I need more than 4 hours of sleep. Lily, Diane said. She used the voice. The one that sounds kind. The one that means surrender. Marcus and I have discussed this. We think it's the right thing for Rose. Marcus and I. Not Marcus and you. Not your family. Marcus and I. As if they were the married couple. As if I was the difficult in-law. The intruder. The temporary guest in my own life. I looked at Marcus. He was still looking at the floor. The same floor. The same spot. Like he'd found something there. Some answer he could live with. But couldn't say out loud. Marcus, I said. Do you want me to go to this place? He paused. It was the longest pause of our marriage. Longer than the pause before he proposed. Longer than the pause when the doctor said it. When the doctor said preeclampsia, a pause that told me everything. Everything his words never would. I could hear the clock on the mantel. Ticking. Each second a small betrayal. I think it might help, he said. Help who? I said. He didn't answer. He never answered the questions that mattered. That was Marcus. Silence where courage should have been. I called my mother that night. I sat in the bathroom. The door was locked. The fan was running, so Marcus wouldn't hear. The tiles were cold under my feet. The bathroom light was too bright. I sat on the edge of the tub, and I told her everything. The visits. The dinner. The brochure. The way Marcus looked at the floor. When his mother decided to send me away. I told her about the onesie. The relabeled spices. The key that no longer fit the lock. I told her all of it. And my voice cracked on the last part. The part where Marcus said nothing. Where he chose the floor over his wife. My mother listened. She didn't interrupt. Not once. When I finished, she said 5 words. 5 words that changed the trajectory of everything that followed. I'm calling Janet Holloway. Janet Holloway was an attorney. My mother knew her from her counseling years. She'd referred families to Janet. Custody disputes. Protective orders. Estate matters. Janet was 62 years old. 5 feet tall. She had the demeanor of someone who had seen it. Every form of human cruelty. And had simply decided to be better organized. Better organized than all of it. Her office smelled like coffee and paper. Law books lined the walls. Her desk was covered in folders, each one labeled in neat block letters. She wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she looked at you like she already knew. She already knew what you were going to say. Tell me about the house, Janet said. I called her the next morning. It's my grandmother's house. She left it to me. Is your name on the deed? Yes, only my name. And Marcus? No. We never changed it. Good. Is there a mortgage? No. Grandma paid it off in 1994. Janet paused. I could hear her pen stop moving. The silence was deliberate. Then she said this. Lily, I want you to listen carefully. Your mother-in-law is not trying to help you. She's trying to remove you from your house. Once you're in a facility, even voluntarily, it creates a paper trail, a trail that questions your fitness as a parent, your capacity to manage property. If your husband files for divorce while you're there, or if Diane initiates a guardianship petition, the fact that you were in residential care, that becomes evidence. The room went cold. Not the temperature, the feeling, like someone had opened a window in winter, like the air had changed composition. I could feel it in my chest. A tightening, not panic. Recognition. They can't take my house, I said. Not if we act now, Janet said. But if you wait, they'll try. 2 days later, I sat in Janet's office. The office was small and warm. A space heater hummed in the corner. Rain streaked the window behind her desk. I signed the papers. I transferred the deed. My grandmother's house went into a trust. An irrevocable trust. The trustee was my mother. The beneficiary was me. And after me, my daughter Rose. The trust was structured carefully. No sale, no transfer, no lien. No legal action could alter the ownership. Not without the consent of the trustee. My mother, who would sooner walk into traffic than sign away Rose's house. Janet filed the paperwork that afternoon. It was recorded at the county clerk's office by Thursday, stamped and sealed and untouchable. I went to Greenfield the following Monday. I know what you're thinking. Why would I go? If I knew what they were doing, why would I walk into the trap? Because Janet told me to? Go voluntarily, she said. Stay for 3 weeks. Cooperate. Be calm. Be patient. Let them think they've won. Because while you're there, I'll be here. And when you come home, the house will still be yours. The deed will be untouchable. And we will have documented everything. Everything Diane has done. She leaned forward when she said it. Her glasses caught the light. Her voice was quiet but certain. The certainty of someone who wins cases. Not with volume. With preparation. My mother drove me to Greenfield. She held Rose in the back seat. The car smelled like Rose's baby lotion. And the lavender sachets Mom keeps in her purse. The drive was 40 minutes. Neither of us spoke for the first 20. The highway was gray. The sky was gray. The trees were bare. It was that part of spring, where nothing has bloomed yet, where everything looks like it's waiting. Mom didn't cry until I was inside, until she couldn't see me anymore. She told me later. She sat in the parking lot for 45 minutes. Before she could drive, she said the steering wheel was blurry. She wasn't sure if it was tears or exhaustion, or both. She said she gripped the wheel with both hands and breathed the way she taught students. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way you breathe when the world is falling, and you have to keep standing in it. I spent 22 days at Greenfield. The building was a converted manor house. 4 acres of lawn. That sounds nicer than it felt. The hallways smelled like lavender and cleaner. Floor cleaner. The industrial kind. Sweet on top. Chemical underneath. The rooms were private. Small and white. Windows that opened exactly 4 inches. Just enough air to remind you of outside. Not enough to feel free. The bed was narrow. The pillow was flat. The blanket was institutional softness. Designed to feel safe. But it felt like someone else's idea of comfort. The walls were bare except for one print. A watercolor of a meadow. Generic. The kind of art that exists in waiting rooms. The kind that says nothing. On purpose. The first 3 days were the hardest. Not because of the facility. Because of Rose. I missed her with a physical ache. It settled in my chest and didn't move. It was a weight. A heaviness between my ribs. I could feel the phantom weight of her. In my arms, the curve of her head against my shoulder, the warmth of her breath on my neck. I woke up at 2 a.m. to the sound of a baby crying and realized it was someone else's baby. In someone else's room, my baby was 30 miles away, being held by my mother because my husband's mother had decided that I wasn't fit to hold her myself. I cried in the shower every morning. For the first week, the shower was the one private place. The water was lukewarm at best. The pressure was weak, but the sound covered everything. The crying, the anger, the grief that wasn't grief exactly, but felt like it. The loss of something you still have, but can't reach. There was a woman named Celeste. She was in the room next to mine. She was 43. A former real estate agent. She'd been at Greenfield for 6 weeks. She had short dark hair and tired eyes, and a laugh that sounded like it cost her. She told me on my second day, the key to surviving this place: participate enthusiastically in group sessions. Eat the yogurt at breakfast. Everything else tastes like cardboard. She said it without smiling. Then she smiled. And I realized the smile was a survival tool, the same way the yogurt was. "What's your story?" I asked. "Husband number 2. He convinced me I was bipolar. I'm not bipolar. I'm married to a man who doesn't like being disagreed with." She paused. She looked at the ceiling. Was married. Filed the papers from the dayroom phone. Celeste became my friend. Not the kind you make by choice. The kind you make by proximity and shared understanding. Like soldiers in adjacent trenches who nod at each other. Because talking takes energy and nodding says everything. We ate yogurt together every morning. We sat in the dayroom in the afternoons. She told me about her houses. The ones she'd sold. The ones she loved. The one she lost in her first divorce. I told her about my grandmother's house. About the azaleas. About the note in the vanity drawer. She listened the way people listen. When they understand the weight of property. Not the financial weight. The emotional weight. The weight of a place that holds your history. The therapist assigned to me was Dr. Kessler, a woman in her 50s, short gray hair, reading glasses on a chain. She had calm, steady energy, the energy of someone who had heard everything, every version of every story. She'd learned that listening was more useful than reacting. Her office was small and warm, a leather chair, a window facing the lawn, a single plant on the windowsill, green and thriving, which felt like a statement. In a place where nothing else was green. She didn't take notes in our first session. She just sat and watched me. The way a doctor watches before touching. Assessing, not judging. Her eyes were brown and steady. She wore no jewelry. No wedding ring. Her hands were folded in her lap. Patient. As if time didn't matter. As if I could take all the time I needed. In our first session, she asked me something. Describe a typical day at home. I described it. Wake up at 5 when Rose cries. Feed Rose. Change Rose. Put Rose down. Rose crease. Pick Rose up. Try to eat something. Rose crease. Marcus leaves for work at 7:30. He doesn't say goodbye. He says, "See you tonight," which is not the same thing. Diane arrives at 2. Comments on the house. Holds Rose for 15 minutes. Hands her back. Leaves. I make dinner. Marcus comes home. Asks why the house is messy. I go to bed. Rose wakes up at midnight. Again at 2. Again at 4. Start over. Kessler listened to the entire description. Every word. Then she said this. "Where in that day does anyone help you?" I opened my mouth. Then I closed it. The answer was nowhere. A blank space in a schedule with no blank spaces. I felt something shift inside me. Not breaking. Clarifying. Like fog lifting from a road. I could see it now. The shape of my life, and the emptiness in the middle of it. In our second session, she asked about Diane. I told her about the vitamins, the articles, the binner, the daily visits, the onesie inspection, the brochure. Kessler took notes this time. She wrote slowly, deliberately. The way someone writes, when what they're hearing is evidence, not conversation. Her pen moved in steady, even strokes. She didn't look up. She didn't react. She just wrote. In our third session, she said it. What I already knew. You don't have a psychiatric condition, Lily. You have a mother-in-law condition. I laughed. The first time I'd laughed in weeks. It sounded strange, like a door opening, in a room that had been closed too long. The sound surprised me. I'd forgotten I could make it. Your assessments are normal, she said. Adjustment to new motherhood, sleep deprivation, lack of spousal support, situational stressors, not clinical pathology. I'll note that in your discharge summary. She paused. She took off her glasses. She looked at me directly. I've seen this pattern before. A controlling family member. They pathologize normal stress. To gain leverage. They use the language of concern. To mask the mechanics of control. Your mother-in-law didn't send you here because she was worried about you. She sent you here because you were in the way. In the way. Of the house. Of the baby. Of her son. Of whatever Diane had planned next. Those words landed like stones in still water, rippling outward, touching everything. I spent the remaining days differently. I did something I hadn't done in months. I slept. 8 hours the first night, 9 the second. By the end of the first week, I was sleeping through the night. For the first time since the third trimester. The bed was narrow, but it was mine. The silence was institutional, but it was rest. Real rest. The kind that new mothers need and rarely get, because the world treats motherhood like this, like a performance, and exhaustion like a character flaw, as if needing sleep means needing a diagnosis. I realized what I needed, not a facility, not a diagnosis, not a binder full of articles. Rest. Simple, ordinary rest. In the absence of Diane, those two things were connected. The absence of her was itself a kind of healing. I also spent time thinking about Marcus, about the pause, about the fact that he chose his mother, her assessment of me over my own words, about the fact that he hadn't visited, not once. Greenfield allowed visitors, Wednesdays and Saturdays, 4 Wednesdays, 3 Saturdays, 7 possible visits, 0 from my husband, 0. I counted each one. Every Wednesday, I looked at the sign-in sheet. Every Saturday, I checked the visitor's log. His name was never there. Not once. The space where his name should have been was the loudest silence of our marriage. My mother came on every Wednesday. And every Saturday, 7 visits. 7 for 7. She brought photos of Rose. She brought granola bars. From the organic market. Because she'd heard the food was institutional, which it was. She brought me a sweater. She'd knitted it herself. Lumpy. Asymmetrical. One sleeve longer than the other. The warmest thing I owned. I wore it every evening. I pulled it around me like armor. Like a hug that didn't need hands. How's Rose? I asked every time. Perfect, she said every time. Eating well. Sleeping better. Tried to grab the cat. We don't have a cat. The neighbor's cat came through the yard. Rose was very interested. These small reports were oxygen. They were the air I breathed at Greenfield. Every detail. The cat. The eating. The sleeping. Proof that my daughter was alive. That she was well. That she was being held by someone who loved her. While I was at Greenfield, Mom took care of Rose. She drove 4 hours from her house to mine. With a suitcase and a car seat. And the same quiet determination. The determination she'd had when she raised me. Alone. After my father left. She moved into the guest room. She warmed bottles at midnight. She sang the same lullabies she'd sung to me. Off-key, but consistently. The same melodies. Night after night. The way she'd done it 30 years ago. And she didn't let Diane in the house. The baby is fine, Mom told Diane on the phone. I'll send photos. Her voice was polite. But the politeness was a wall. And Diane could not climb it. Diane came to the door twice. My mother met her on the porch both times. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She simply stood in the doorway. Her body filling the frame. Not aggressively. Just completely. Lily asked me to take care of Rose while she's resting. I'm doing that. Diane called Marcus. Marcus called my mother. My mother said this. Your wife is in a facility because your mother put her there. Your daughter is safe. When Lily comes home, you can discuss the rest. Her voice was even, like a level on a shelf, perfectly balanced, perfectly clear. Marcus didn't come to the house while I was gone. Not once. Not to see his daughter. Not to check on the house. Not to water the plants or collect the mail. Not once. The thing Diane did while I was at Greenfield, the thing Janet had predicted, it happened on day 14. A real estate agent contacted the county clerk to begin the process of listing a property, a residential property, my grandmother's house. The listing was initiated by Diane. Acting, she claimed on behalf of Marcus. She said he had power of interest in the property. There is no legal concept called that. Power of interest does not exist. Diane had invented it. She had invented a legal term. The way she invented everything, with confidence and no foundation. The clerk flagged the request. Because the property was held in trust, an irrevocable trust, the clerk contacted Janet Holloway, the trust's registered attorney. Janet contacted my mother, who was standing in my kitchen, feeding Rose a bottle of expressed milk. The morning light was coming through the window. Rose was in her arms. The phone rang. My mother put the bottle down. She called Janet. Then she called me. They tried to sell the house, she said. I was in the day room at Greenfield, watching a woman do a puzzle of a lighthouse. She was placing pieces slowly, carefully. The day room smelled like tea and carpet. I held the phone to my ear and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not anger, not fear, clarity. The kind of clarity that burns clean, like light through glass. Sharp and focused and undeniable. Janet has it, my mother said. The house is safe. The trust held. I hung up. I went back to my room. I sat on the bed. I looked at the ceiling, white and featureless and steady. I thought about my grandmother's note, the one in the vanity drawer, the one I'd forgotten. This is yours. Don't let anyone tell you it isn't. She hadn't been sentimental. She'd been strategic. She'd known. Decades before I did. She'd known that someone would try, and she'd left me the words I'd need. I was discharged on a Wednesday, 22 days after I arrived. Kessler walked me to the front entrance. The air outside was warm. Spring had arrived while I was inside. The trees had leaves. The parking lot smelled like asphalt and rain. Birds were singing somewhere I couldn't see. Kessler handed me 2 documents. The first was my discharge summary. It read like vindication. Patient presents with no psychiatric disorder. Adjustment difficulties. Consistent with new parenthood. And family conflict. No medication indicated. No follow-up required. Patient demonstrates strong cognitive function, emotional awareness, and maternal bonding. Continued family therapy recommended. For the family, not the patient. That last line. Kessler had underlined it. With a ruler. A straight, deliberate line. Beneath the most important sentence. She knew where this was going. She knew what that line would mean in court. The second document was her business card. On the back, she'd written this: if you ever need someone to testify, call this number. I looked at her. She looked at me. With the expression of someone who knows. Who has seen this movie before. Who knows how it ends. Who is handing the protagonist something. Something she'll need in Act 3. Keep this somewhere safe, she said. I kept both documents in Janet's folder. The folder was labeled Diane. It had grown during my 22 days. It now contained the brochure, the discharge summary, Kessler's card, the county clerk's flagged request, a timeline of Diane's documented visits, and printed copies of 14 text messages Diane had sent Marcus during my stay. Those messages were a masterpiece of incrimination. They existed because of my mother. During Marcus's one visit to check on Rose, his only visit in 22 days, on a Saturday afternoon, my mother offered to make him coffee. While the kettle boiled, while Marcus showered off the drive, my mother picked up his phone. It was on the kitchen counter, face up. It wasn't locked. Marcus used the same passcode for everything. His mother's birthday. My mother guessed it on the second try. She knew Diane's birthday, because Diane had mentioned it 19 times. She photographed the messages, carefully. She sent them to Janet. Then she put the phone back, exactly where it had been. She poured the coffee. She said nothing. Not a word. Not a hint. My mother is not a dramatic person. She is a quiet person. Who does dramatic things? Without changing her expression, she learned this from 30 years of counseling, school counseling, where the correct response to every crisis is the same. Stay calm. Document everything. And call the right person. The messages included these. The house should sell quickly in this market. Once the sale goes through, we can set up a trust for the baby. She won't fight it. She's too tired. Don't mention the house at the facility. The realtor says comparables list at 320 to 350. If she asks, tell her you're handling it. We should move forward before she's discharged. 14 messages. Each one a brick. In a wall Diane didn't know she was building. A wall around herself, a wall made of evidence, and timestamps. And her own words. She was wrong about one thing. I wasn't too tired. I was too quiet. People confuse those. They look the same from the outside. But inside they are very different. Tired gives up. Quiet waits. I came home on a Wednesday afternoon. The taxi pulled up to the curb. I saw the house first. Then the porch. Then my mother. She was standing on the porch, wearing the blue cardigan, the one she always wears when she's trying not to cry. She was holding Rose on her hip, the way she'd held me in every photograph. From my childhood, securely, with one hand pressed flat against the back, as if the most important thing in the world was making sure nothing fell. Rose saw me and reached out. She didn't know I'd been gone 22 days. She didn't know what a facility was. She didn't know what a mother-in-law was. She didn't know why adults make decisions. Decisions that hurt the people they protect. She just saw me and reached. And I took her. I held her against my chest. I stood on the porch of my grandmother's house. I breathed her in. Milk. Baby soap. Something warm that didn't have a name, but that every mother recognizes. That smell that means home. That means yours. That means no one can take this from me. My mother put her hand on my shoulder. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The hand said, I'm here. The shoulder said, I know. The house was clean. Not Diane clean. Not reorganized and relabeled and inspected. Mom clean. Comfortable. Lived in. The dishes were done. The laundry was folded. There was soup on the stove. Chicken soup. The kind that takes all day. Fresh flowers on the kitchen table. Daisies. Not lilies. Because my mother has always known this. The best way to honor someone is to give them something different. Different from what they're named after. Marcus was in the living room, sitting on the couch, the same spot, the same couch where he'd been sitting when Diane came. When she handed me the brochure, he looked surprised to see me, which told me everything. He didn't know I was being discharged. Diane hadn't told him, or she had told him, and he hadn't cared enough to be ready. Hey, he said. Hey, I said. How are you feeling? Clear, I said. He looked at me. The way people look at someone who's changed in a way they can't identify. Like trying to read a book whose cover has been replaced. I wasn't the same woman who'd left. That woman had been exhausted. Confused? Operating on an assumption that her husband had her best interests, that his mother had her best interests. This woman had slept for 3 weeks, spoken to an excellent therapist, and read 14 text messages. That proved otherwise. I'm going to check on Rose, I said, and I walked past him without stopping. I went upstairs to the nursery. My mother had repainted the trim. She must have done it while Rose napped, which meant she'd painted in absolute silence. That's the kind of thing my mother does. When she loves you, silent acts of renovation. The room smelled like fresh paint and baby powder. I put Rose in her crib. I watched her settle into sleep. The way babies do, all at once, like a switch being turned, as if consciousness is a choice. And they've simply decided to opt out. I stood in the nursery for a long time. I looked at the walls. Soft yellow. I looked at the mobile Mom had hung. Felt animals she'd sewn herself. Lopsided but colorful. A giraffe with uneven legs. A bird with one wing larger than the other. Beautiful in their imperfection. I looked at the window. It faced the backyard, where my grandmother's azaleas were blooming. Pink and white. The same colors every spring since 1968. My grandmother planted those azaleas. The year she moved into this house. She planted them because she said this. Every house needs something that comes back. Something you can count on. Something that doesn't need you. Doesn't need you to remind it to bloom. It just blooms because that's what it does. Because that's what it was made to do. I thought about that. About things that come back. About things you can count on. About what comes back and what doesn't. And which category Marcus belonged to. That night, after Marcus was asleep, I sat on the porch with my mother. The air smelled like soil and azaleas, and something green I couldn't name, but had always associated with this house. Crickets, frogs in the neighbor's yard, the distant sound of a television. From across the street, muffled in blue through someone's curtains. The porch light was off. We sat in the dark. 2 women on a porch. One who had survived this before, and one who was surviving it now. Janet says we have enough, my mother said. Enough for what? Enough for whatever you decide. Divorce. Restraining order against Diane. A custody arrangement that keeps Rose with you. Lily, you have the discharge summary. It says you're perfectly fine. You have Dr. Kessler's testimony offer. You have the flagged sale attempt. You have the text messages. And you have the trust. The house is yours. Nobody can change that. I sat with that for a long time. I watched the streetlight flicker. At the end of the block, I listened to the frogs. Their chorus was steady and repetitive. The same notes. Over and over. The sound of something that doesn't stop. Even when the world is complicated. I thought about all the things I'd let happen. Because I was tired. And all the things I wouldn't let happen now. Because I was awake. I want a divorce, I said. I know, my mother said. I've known since the brochure. How? Because the day a man lets his mother send his wife away, that's the day the marriage is already over. Everything after that is just paperwork. My mother has a gift for sentences. Sentences that sound simple and contain everything. She developed this gift over 30 years. 30 years of talking to teenagers. Teenagers who needed the truth. Delivered in 10 words or fewer. She never wastes a syllable. She never raises her voice. She simply says the thing. And the thing is so precisely true. That it doesn't need volume to be heard. Will you stay? I asked. As long as you need me. What about your house? My house has been standing since 1979. It can stand without me a few more weeks. This house needs me more right now. She stayed for 3 more weeks. She was there when I filed. She was there when Marcus was served. She was there when Diane's voicemail arrived. She listened to it once, nodded, and said 2 words. Save that. She was there for all of it. The way she'd been there for all of everything. Quietly. Persistently. With a cup of coffee. And an opinion she'd deliver only when asked. And the unshakable certainty that her daughter was not broken, had never been broken, and would not be broken. Not by a woman with a binder. And a son who couldn't look up from the floor. I filed the next morning. Janet handled. She was thorough and efficient. She had the emotional temperature of a scalpel. Not cold, just precise. She filed the divorce petition, a request for primary custody, and a motion to restrict Diane, restrict her unsupervised access to Rose. All before lunch, 3 filings before noon. While I fed Rose applesauce, while the world kept turning, while the paperwork began its quiet work. Diane will contest everything, Janet said. That's fine. People who contest everything eventually have to explain everything. And explaining is where they lose. Marcus was served at work. He called me from the parking lot. At 11:15 in the morning, I know the exact time, I was feeding Rose her bottle. I looked at the clock on the microwave. When the phone rang, the kitchen was quiet. Rose was sucking contentedly. The refrigerator hummed. And then his voice. His voice was the voice of a man who expected the rain to fall elsewhere, who expected consequences for other people, not for him. Lily, we can talk about this. We're past talking, Marcus. My mom was just trying to help. I paused. I wanted to scream. I wanted to list every single thing. The binner, the brochure, the facility, the sale attempt, the text messages. 14 separate acts of invasion, disguised as concern. But screaming is what Diane expected. Screaming is what they'd use. To say I was unstable, so I didn't scream. I spoke. My voice was steady, low. The voice of someone who has evidence and patience. And an attorney named Janet Holloway. Your mom tried to sell my house. While I was in a facility she put me in. That's not help. That's a campaign. He was quiet for a long time. I could hear the parking lot. Cars passing. Someone's radio. The hum of an engine. Marcus was sitting in his car. In a parking lot. Learning that his marriage was over. And the world around him was continuing. As if nothing had happened. That's the strange thing. About the worst moments of your life. The birds keep singing. The traffic keeps moving. The radio keeps playing. The sky doesn't care. Then he said something. Something that told me more. More than 3 years of marriage ever had. She said you'd never find out. I let those words sit between us. She said you'd never find out. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I didn't know. Not, I should have stopped her. She said you'd never find out. As if the problem wasn't what they did. But that I discovered it. As if the crime was my awareness. Not their action. That sentence told me who he was. Who he had always been. A man who measured wrong by exposure. Not by deed. Goodbye, Marcus, I said. I hung up. I put the phone on the counter. Rose was in her high chair, smearing mashed banana on the tray. Her fingers were yellow and sticky. She had banana on her chin. On her nose? On the bib my mother had embroidered. She looked up at me. Brown eyes that looked like my mother's. And she smiled. A smile that had no agenda. No strategy. No calculation. Just joy. Pure, uncomplicated, banana-covered joy. Your dad is going to be fine, I said. He's just going to be fine somewhere else. Diane called me that evening. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was 4 minutes, 17 seconds. It contained specific phrases. This is all a misunderstanding, appeared 3 times. What's best for the baby appeared 4 times. My name appeared 0 times. She called me dear. She called me Marcus's wife. She never once said Lily. Not once. As if my name was irrelevant. As if I was a title, not a person. The next day, Diane called again. This time, her voice was different. Harder. Controlled. The way a blade is controlled. Sharp and deliberate and cold. I've spoken to an attorney, she said. Marcus has rights. A grandmother has rights. This house was never meant for you to keep. Rose left it to you. Because she didn't know what she was doing. At the end, we can resolve this amicably, or we can resolve it in front of a judge. I'd prefer the former, but I'm prepared for the latter. I played this message for Janet. Janet listened to it twice. The second time she smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a chess player who has seen the opponent's strategy and found it wanting. Then she said 3 words. Let her try. Diana tried. She hired an attorney. His name was Douglas Brent. He specialized in estate challenges and grandparents' rights. He was expensive. He was confident. He made the mistake of underestimating Janet, which is like underestimating a hurricane. A small, organized hurricane. With reading glasses and a beaded chain, Brent filed a motion, challenging the irrevocable trust, on the grounds that my grandmother Rose had been unduly influenced. When she left me the house, his argument was this. An elderly woman, in declining health, had been manipulated by her granddaughter into writing a will that excluded other family members. It was a bold argument. It was also wrong. Janet's response was 4 pages long. It contained 14 exhibits, including my grandmother's medical records, showing full cognitive capacity. At the time of the will, testimony from her estate attorney, confirming the bequest was her explicit wish. Her repeated wish, and my personal favorite, a handwritten letter. My grandmother had left it with her attorney, specifically anticipating this challenge. She had known, even then, even before Diane existed in our lives. She had known someone would try. The letter read this. If anyone questions why I left it to Lily, tell them it's because she showed up every Sunday for 9 years with lavender shortbread and no agenda. That's the entire explanation. The judge dismissed Brent's motion. In a single hearing, he did not invite a second filing. He looked at Brent over his glasses. The judge dismissed Brent's motion. In a single hearing, he did not invite a second filing. He looked at Brent over his glasses. The way judges look at arguments that have wasted the court's time. with a patience that is itself a verdict. Diane's total legal expenses were significant. Douglas Brent's fees, court costs, the forensic estate review she'd commissioned. Roughly $47,000. That was more than her kitchen renovation, the one she'd spent 3 years discussing. There is a symmetry in that. A symmetry I find deeply satisfying. The divorce itself was final in 5 months. Marcus didn't fight for custody. Janet's folder made sure of that. The discharge summary from Dr. Kessler, the flagged sale attempt from the clerk, the 14 text messages, the voicemail, where Diane threatened legal action and disparaged my grandmother's mental capacity. Every piece of evidence pointed the same way. The same conclusion. Marcus and Diane had conspired to remove me from my home, to institutionalize me without medical basis, to attempt to sell my property. While I was absent, the evidence was overwhelming, and it was all in Diane's own words. Marcus's attorney was a sensible man. His name was Gareth. He took one look at the folder, one look at the evidence. He called Janet the same afternoon. "We'd like to settle," he said. "I thought you might," Janet said. Marcus got visitation every other weekend, supervised for the first 6 months, because Janet argued successfully that Marcus had demonstrated something, an inability to make independent decisions, parenting decisions, free from his mother's influence. The supervisor was court-appointed. Her name was Denise. She sat in Marcus's apartment during visits. She took notes. She had the quiet authority of someone whose report would matter, whose report would determine everything. Whether the supervision continued or ended. She watched without judgment, but she watched everything. Marcus was embarrassed by this. I knew, because he said it at a handoff. At my front door, "It's hard having someone watch you parent." "Yes," I said. "It is." He heard what I meant. For once, the irony landed. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something like understanding in his eyes. Not enough, but something. Diane was served a cease and desist order, restricting contact with me and with Rose. Outside of Marcus's supervised visitation, she could not come to my house. She could not call me. She could not send intermediaries. She could not initiate legal proceedings. Regarding the property, the trust, or my grandmother's estate, the order was comprehensive. Janet had written it herself. Every clause, every restriction, every consequence for violation. Diane received the order on a Tuesday. She called Marcus. Marcus called Janet. Janet said this: "The order speaks for itself." Diane called Douglas Brent. Douglas Brent said this: "I would strongly recommend compliance." Then he sent her his final invoice. I like to imagine that moment. Diane opening that invoice. At her kitchen table, the same table where she'd hosted me. For pot roast and interrogations, the same table with the cloth napkins and the crystal glasses, realizing that the campaign to remove me had cost her more than the house was worth, in legal fees and failed motions. I don't know if she had that realization, but the math supports it. I kept the house. I kept Rose. I kept the azaleas. And I kept the note. My grandmother's note. The one I'd tucked into the vanity drawer. The one I'd forgotten. I had it framed. It hangs in the hallway now, next to a photograph of my grandmother, standing on the porch in 1967, holding a shovel, dirt on her knees, a smile that looks exactly like defiance, like a woman who built something and dared the world to take it. After the divorce was final, Mom stayed. Another month, she helped me repaint the rooms, one at a time. The nursery in soft yellow, the living room in warm gray, the kitchen in white so clean, it made the old cabinets look new. She said Grandma would have approved. She always said yellow was the happiest color. She also said green tiles were the worst decision your grandfather ever made. And he once bought a motorcycle. Mom installed a new deadbolt on the front door. It required 3 trips to the hardware store, a YouTube tutorial, and a phone call to a handyman. He talked her through the last step, because the instructions were impossible, clearly written by someone who has never seen a door. She said that. She completed the installation with the same focus as 30 years of counseling. Methodically, with occasional muttering and a deep suspicion of step 7, she planted a new row of azaleas. Along the side fence, reinforcements, she said. She knelt in the dirt. She wore gardening gloves Mom had owned forever, the ones with the faded floral pattern. She dug each hole carefully, placed each plant like it mattered, because it did. Every bush was a statement. This ground is claimed. This ground is loved. This ground is ours. On her last evening before driving home, she sat on the porch. She held Rose. She watched the sun go down behind the neighbor's oak tree. The sky turned orange and then purple. Then that deep blue, that means the day is done. Rose was asleep. The azaleas were blooming. The house was quiet. The way a house is quiet when it's been fought for. Not empty, but earned. Your grandmother would be proud of you, she said. For what? For standing in the doorway. She meant it literally and figuratively. The doorway of the house, the doorway of the marriage, the doorway between who I'd been, exhausted, compliant, shrinking, and the person I was becoming. Someone who stood, someone who stayed, someone who didn't move. You know, she said, when your father left, I stood in a doorway too, the front door of our apartment. He walked out, and I stood there, for I don't know how long, minutes, maybe longer. I thought about closing the door. I thought about running after him. I thought about sitting on the floor and not getting up. And then you cried. You were too. And I closed the door. And I went to you. And I picked you up. And that was that. You never told me that. Some stories you save. You save them until your daughter needs them. Rose is 14 months old now. She walks. Not gracefully, but with determination. The determination of someone who has discovered that the world is three-dimensional and is furious at gravity for making it difficult to navigate. She babbles in a language only she understands, though she says ma with enough consistency. That I count it. I count it every time. It sounds different from her other sounds. More intentional. More directed. She looks at me when she says it, and my heart does something involuntary. Every single time. She has a particular fondness for the azaleas. She tries to eat them. Every time I take her to the backyard, I catch her every time, which is a metaphor for parenthood. A metaphor I didn't appreciate until I was living it. This constant, gentle interception between the person you love and the thing they're reaching for, that might hurt them. Marcus sees her every other weekend. The supervision ended after 6 months. Once Denise's reports confirmed something, that Marcus could manage a weekend without consulting his mother about diaper brands. He's adequate. He shows up. He brings the wrong snacks. He forgets the diaper bag. He once put her shoes on the wrong feet, which is endearing or incompetent, depending on your perspective. I choose endearing, because choosing anger takes energy. Energy I'd rather spend on Rose. He's also started saying things that suggest he's beginning to understand. Small things. During a weekend handoff, he said this: I should have gotten up that night. When you were on the nursery floor, I didn't respond. Not because I didn't hear him, because some apologies need to exist. Without an audience, they need to sit in the air and be filled, not answered. Another time he said this: I've started seeing a therapist. Mom doesn't know. Good, I said, on both counts. Diane has not been to my house. Not since the cease and desist. She sends Marcus gifts for Rose. For his weekends, expensive clothes in the wrong size. Toys for children twice her age. Books with inscriptions. They always begin the same way. To my granddaughter, they never mention me. Each gift is wrapped in monogrammed paper. Diane's initials in gold. Because even her presence announced something. Who they're really from. Not love. Ownership. She also sends cards. Birthday cards. Holiday cards. Cards for no occasion at all. Each containing a $20 bill. And a message in Diane's precise handwriting. Simultaneously affectionate and proprietary. For our precious Rose, they say. Our. Even on paper. Even at a distance. Even after everything. Marcus told me once at a handoff. His mother still asks about the house. She wants to know if you've considered selling. I smiled. Tell her the azaleas are blooming. He looked confused. That was fine. Marcus has always been confused by things that require more than one layer. More than one layer of understanding. He operates on the surface of conversations. The way a duck operates on the surface of water. Present. Functional. But unaware of what's moving underneath. Janet sends me a Christmas card every year. Inside, she writes the same thing. The trust holds. 3 words. The most reassuring 3 words I know. At least for me. I send her a card back. With a photo of Rose on the porch. Last year's photo showed Rose sitting on the steps, surrounded by fallen azalea petals. Looking directly at the camera, my mother described her expression. Your grandmother's face. When she was right about something, my mother calls every Sunday. She asks about Rose first, then about the house, then about me. In that order, which is exactly right. It means she trusts me. Trusts that I'll take care of myself. But wants to make sure the foundation is solid. She started teaching Rose words. Over the phone, last week she spent 15 minutes saying azalea, while Rose responded with la la la. My mother counted this as a success. I could hear her smiling through the phone. I've been renovating the house. Slowly, room by room. I repainted the kitchen. I replaced the green bathroom tiles. The ones from 1983. That shade of green that no longer exists. Not in nature. Not anywhere. I replaced them with white subway tile. My grandmother would have loved or hated it. My mother said it was very modern, which is the highest compliment she gives. To things she doesn't understand. I refinished the hardwood floors myself. I rende la scène. I watched tutorials. I spent 3 weekends. Stripping 30 years of carpet and polyurethane. The dust was everywhere. In my hair, in my lungs, on every surface. Rose stayed with Mom those weekends. I worked alone in the house. The sander vibrated through my arms, through my whole body. It was loud and physical and satisfying. The work of uncovering something hidden. Underneath, I found the original oak planks. My grandmother's husband had laid them in 1967. They were scratched, stained, warped in places, imperfect and beautiful, which is how I feel about most things that have survived. Under the carpet in the hallway, I found more. A peny. A 1967 peny. Pressed into the wood near the front door. My grandmother had told me about it. Her husband put a penny under the floorboards. On the day they moved in, for luck, he'd said. She'd said luck had nothing to do with it. We built this house with work, she told me. The penny was just his way of saying. He hoped the work would hold. The work held. The penny held. The trust held. The azaleas held. Everything that was built with care. Held. On Rose's first birthday, Mom drove 4 hours. With a cake she'd baked herself. Lemon with lavender frosting. Not a conventional flavor, but exactly the kind of thing Grandma would try. The frosting was purple and sweet. The cake was moist and tart. We sat on the porch. The 3 of us, Mom, Rose, 3 generations on a porch, built by hands that came before us. We ate cake. We watched Rose smash her piece with both fists. She smeared frosting on her face. She laughed at nothing and everything. The sun was warm on our shoulders. A breeze moved through the azaleas. The porch creaked the way it always had. The sound of a house settling into itself. Content. You know what Diane would say? Mom asked. That the frosting is an unusual color? That you should have hired a caterer. We laughed. Not a mean laugh. The kind of laugh that comes from surviving. From finding that the other side has cake. And a porch. And the person who never left. The kind of laugh that sounds like relief. And gratitude. And the quiet, stubborn joy of still being here. Celeste texts me sometimes. She's out of Greenfield. Divorced. Running a small real estate business. Her own. She sold her first house last month. She sent me a photo of the sold sign. With a caption, "Turns out I'm better at selling houses than being married to men who think I'm crazy." I sent her a photo back. Rose eating an azalea petal. With a caption. Same energy. Sometimes at night. After Rose is asleep. And the house is quiet. The only sound is the refrigerator humming. And the frogs in the neighbor's yard. I sit on the porch. I look at the azaleas. I think about my grandmother. She was born in 1932. She raised 4 children. She survived a war, a bad marriage, and a kitchen renovation. That took 18 months. She buried a husband. She built a garden. She lived in this house for 53 years. She walked these floors. She sat on this porch. She watched these same azaleas bloom. Year after year after year. She planted them because she said this. They reminded her that things could be beautiful without being complicated. They bloom every spring without being asked. They don't need permission. They don't need a binder or a brochure. They don't need a plan. They just bloom. Because that's what they were made to do. She left me this house because she knew what I would need. Before I knew I would need it, she left it in my name because she understood that ownership isn't just about property. It's about standing somewhere and knowing the ground beneath you is yours and that no one can move you off of it. Not a husband who looks at the floor. Not a mother-in-law with a brochure. Not a real estate agent with an invented term. No one. This is yours, her note said. Don't let anyone tell you it isn't. I didn't let them. And the azaleas are blooming. If you've ever stood in a doorway and decided not to move, for your child, for your home, for the ground your grandmother planted, then you already know how this feels. And if you haven't yet, I hope this story finds you before you need it, because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stand exactly where you are. And sometimes the women who came before you already knew you'd need to. There are more stories like this one. You're welcome to stay as long as you'd like.